Hey everybody, we'll be starting here shortly. Hello, my name is Laurel Rutledge. I am the CEO of LaurelRutledge.com, the creator of the Rutledge Perspective podcast, and now I am the host of the Rutledge Perspective on KCOH TV, The Boost, and I am so excited. My background in human resources and also in business and consulting has given me the opportunity to share information with all of you, and what we're going to do is talk about the foundational pieces, whether or not you're building a business or you're building a career. It all comes down to strategy and people. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know who needs to be on your team? So please join me, join in the conversation, catch the show both on the radio, on the app, and also on Facebook. And I will be on Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you there. Good morning, good morning. It is Tuesday at 10 o'clock and we are getting ready to start the Rutledge Perspective. I am so happy to be here. We continue our social distancing. So Jerry and I are doing the right thing here. And today I am excited because I'm going to do my PSAs like I always do. But I'm excited because we have Adrian Villacorta, our resident attorney, on the line as a guest today in studio. So we're going to be answering some of those questions that came up a couple of weeks ago about the business. And some other stuff. So before I do that, let's do the PSAs. First PSA, today is my mother's birthday. Woo! Happy birthday, Mama! I'm so excited. And so the census, there was just an announcement, I saw it yesterday. They may be delaying the date and the deadline for the census. So if you have it, you still need to go ahead and fill it out. Why wait? It takes 10 minutes. But they may be delaying that a little bit, at least the field part of the census. To make sure that we get a good count, especially with this whole COVID thing going and social distancing and people staying home. So pay attention to your census. If you can, just mail it in or just do it online and get that done. Remember, even though tomorrow is the 15th, tomorrow's normal tax day, there is an extension till July 15th for taxes. So you still need to get on that. So it doesn't mean we get a reprieve from filing at all. It just means we don't have to file tomorrow. And there was an announcement today that I heard that there is $50 million, must be $50 million that's been earmarked for businesses in Texas, small businesses in Texas. So
I think it's million.
50 million, okay. 50 million that's been earmarked for small businesses in Texas. So if you are still trying to get some help for your business, please go to Small Business Administration, check with your financial advisor, go to the unemployment offices, do whatever you can to get the information that you need, because it is kind of difficult right now. People are having trouble with websites. They're just getting overwhelmed and being on phones for a long time waiting for somebody to answer. So don't give up. The monies are out there and they're earmarked. So if you are in need right now, go to the Small Business Administration, get the information that you can get, see if you can get aligned. There are independent contractors out there and other businesses that are helping people get this money. So there may be a cost to that, but just, do not sit and overwhelm or not understanding what. There are a lot of people out there that can help. So don't forget. Good morning, Miss Young, Mama Young. She's on my Facebook page. So with that, and Sylvia, it's your birthday today too. I don't know if she's listening or not, but so she says birthday with my mom. So today, one more thing, registering to vote. So you guys saw what happened in Wisconsin. This is a nonpartisan announcement. People had to choose between staying socially distant and staying home or going to vote. So your voice matters. Pay attention to what's happening in your state. Pay attention to what's happening locally. Make sure you are registered. Make sure you understand where your polls are. Make sure you understand how to absentee vote. Just really pay attention, y'all, because this is a big election year. Local, state, and federal. Don't forget the local elections. It starts there. So my PSA for voting, I don't miss a vote. So please, please, please make sure you're registered to vote. Okay, with that, let's jump in.
Say good morning,
Adrian. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everybody?
Everybody's good. How are y'all?
Great. And thank y'all who are on KCOH The Boost on that Facebook page, on Jerry's Facebook page. So good to see y'all this morning. Adrian, are you staying socially distanced?
Yeah, this whole isolation thing is driving me a little crazy. Because Jerry, you guys know I'm a hugger.
That's what I know. That's why I told her to stay away from him.
Yeah. Yeah, y'all check on your huggers because they are not okay. They are not okay.
I think it's hitting huggers harder than anybody else.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I'm cool. I am cool in my bed, in my house, by myself. You know, it's all right. Doing the video conferences is cool.
Yeah, it's taken me a little while to get to Zoom. I mean, we've had a couple court hearings in the last week and a half, and I'm sitting here at my house with a suit top and shorts and flip-flops on. You think I'm kidding, but I'm not.
I believe it.
Yeah, that's the way it happens sometimes. You got to be professional, at least where the camera is.
Jerry, isn't that kind of how you bring sexy back?
You brought it back, even in the quarantine. You clean, boy.
That's awesome. Well, Adrian, we went on the show, we talk about help for small businesses, but also, leaders and individuals as they're either building a business, building a department, building a career. And we had some things come up in the midst of this kind of social isolation, businesses having to figure out how they're doing business differently, furloughing people, laying off people, all those kind of things. And one of the big questions that came up last week or week before last was, okay, so I've been able to keep people on, but now I'm going to have to make a decision about who gets to stay and who has to go. And so one of the things I talk to people about is, when you're trying to make that decision, don't start with the names of the people first. You need to start with what work needs to be done first, and then you move from there. So what kind of advice, and I also tell people, find a lawyer. What kind of advice do you give people who are now starting to have to make decisions and tough decisions about maybe furloughing or laying off? And maybe talk about the difference between a furlough and a layoff.
Yeah, well, if you're furloughed, technically you're not getting unemployment benefits. If you're laid off, then that does trigger unemployment benefits.
Did y'all catch that?
That's one thing.
That's important.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So furloughed, you're just basically being told, we don't have work for you, but we're going to bring you back during that period of time. Then technically with some of these federal laws, like the Paycheck Protection Act or Paycheck Protection Program, that should supplement the benefits to take the ease off the unemployment benefits. But if you're laid off, there's no guarantee of rehire, and at that point you are eligible for unemployment benefits.
And so if you're a business and you're trying to decide what to do, how do you decide between, let me just furlough people and guarantee in quotes, right, that I'm going to bring them back, or do I just go ahead and lay them off? What are some of the things people should consider about that?
Well, this is kind of what I've been telling my employer clients, is that treat everybody open and honestly. Okay?
Exactly.
So you get your whole employment team together, and ideally this would have happened 2 or 3 weeks ago,
right.
But it's still not too late, right?
Yeah.
And you just say, look, everybody knows what's going on with COVID. We are in an economic crisis. We've tried to keep, assuming the business is still open right now, we've tried to do everything we can. And unfortunately, we're going to have to make some really hard decisions, and we want to be open and honest with everybody. I know some employers out there, not the folks that I've been consulting with, but they're not having that open and honest conversation with the employees. And I think when the employers that I know that I've consulted with, that they have had those conversations, the employees understand. There's no resentment, no hard feelings. Right. They understand what's going on. So then from an employer's perspective, let's say that we're talking about an employer that's still conducting business, right, but is now having to make that tough choice as to what to do.
Right.
I would start off by probably recommending that the employers make an offer of voluntary furloughs of non-essential employees.
Right.
I would encourage them to use vacation or sick time to help ease that financial burden.
Right.
Then after that, I think the employer's stuck in the really difficult decision of who to furlough and who to lay off.
Right.
You could, like, if you're going to go through a furlough process, and if you think that, depending on your industry, obviously, right?
Right.
I think there would be a difference between a medical mask manufacturer versus somebody who's in the luxury item business, like cars or jewelers, things of that nature, where the luxury item employer, it's probably going to take a little bit longer for them to bounce back before people start feeling comfortable easing up on their wallets and having disposable income. But if you're making those decisions as to furlough, I suggest maybe starting doing rolling furloughs. So let's say you've got 10 people doing similar jobs. You're laying off, you're furloughing 2 people a week and then rotating.
Right.
Okay, that can help save on some of the payroll issues.
Right. And what you mean by rolling is people, you do two people would go, and then the next week maybe 2 different people would go, and you'd bring the others back. Is that what you mean by rolling?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So then you're also helping people continue at least some level of income during that process, but still minimizing your payroll. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Then, if that's not working, then you just have a layoff issue.
Right.
And that's just so difficult on so many different levels, on a business decision level, on a personal level. It's just crushing.
It is. And I want everybody to really pay attention to a couple of things that Adrian just said. So one, we talked about this last week. Talk to your people. Talk to your people. Be transparent about what's going on. You don't have to be doomsday and make it worse, but the more you talk to people and the more transparent you can be, the more people will trust you, because this, especially when you're having to make these hard decisions, it's about trust. And I just had this conversation with someone yesterday who's ultimately going to be a guest on the show. There was a situation where we had to we were actually carving out a business. And in this carve out of the business, one of the things we were wanting to say to our people that were staying with the spinoff was, look, our intention is we don't intend to lay anybody off. We intend to keep your benefits, keep you whole in benefits. And there were a few other things, but the keeping people whole was really important. We said, we don't know what this is going to look like going forward. We don't know costs are going to go forward, but we do know that our intention is to keep you whole. And the parent company, when we said this is what we're going to tell our people, said, no, you just need to tell them, all you need to say is just trust us. And I said, absolutely not. We're not going to say just trust us. Number one, have you seen our engagement survey that says they don't trust leadership? We are not going to just go say people who were turning their world upside down, just trust us, it'll be okay. We are going to be as transparent as possible.
But whenever you hear somebody say, trust me, instinctively, why should I trust you? Right. That's just asinine.
It is so stupid. And so we ended up getting it the way we wanted it, but and we were very, very honest with people. We said, we don't know ultimately what this is going to look like at the detailed level, but we can tell you without a doubt that our intent is to keep you whole, and we are going to be as transparent and as vocal with you about that process going forward. And that is so important. So guys, when Adrian says talk to your people, be transparent, I'm telling you, I've lived it as well. Be transparent. Tell people as much as you can, as calmly as you can, right? And as in simple language as you can, because then you begin to alleviate some of the stress. And then, as he said, kind of get creative. We've talked about that too. Can you do rolling furloughs for a while? Before you immediately go to a layoff, can you do a rolling furlough where you're at least trying to accommodate people a little bit? So, there are ways to do this. So Adrian, let's say if you have to then start looking at a layoff, what are, from your perspective, from a legal perspective, what are some of the key things people need to think about? Those top 2 to 3 things that people need to really consider if they're going to do a layoff.
As an employer?
As an employer.
Well, let me take one step back on the furloughs.
Okay.
And then remind me of this last question.
Okay.
This is important because this is important for employers.
Yes.
If you're doing a furlough, there's a distinction that needs to be made between salary employees and hourly employees.
Yes.
So for the hourly employees, if you're furloughed and you're not doing any work, you're not getting paid.
Exactly.
If you have a salaried employee and they do any work during that work week, they're entitled to their salary for that week.
Mm-hmm. There you go. I hope y'all got that.
And so for the salaried employees, if you're getting furloughed, the employer needs to be absolutely explicit saying that this particular salaried employee is absolutely prohibited from checking emails, making phone calls, doing anything work-related whatsoever.
Right.
Okay?
Right. And guys, that's important now because remember, everybody's working at home, right? So
Yep.
if you got people working at home and then you're like, you know what, we're going to have to furlough people, that means they've got their computer, they've got their work cell phone, they've got all of this stuff, so they could be online. So to Adrian's point, you have to be very specific, almost to the point where you may have to cut some people off, like cut off their emails, cut off, the cell phones or whatever, to prevent them from working.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, what was the other question? Sorry.
So the question was, if you now are going down the road of laying off, and kind of to your point, maybe talking about those who may be hourly versus salaried in this situation, what are the top, 3 things that employers need to consider in deciding to execute a layoff, and if they've decided to do it, what they need to do first? Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think that in the employment realm, if the first thing that pops up in my mind is what is some potential liability that I may face as an employer if I'm firing an employee, right? So that could be whether there's a discrimination claim or a retaliation claim based on age, race, gender, national origin. Maybe there's a disability involved, and those are probably issues 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. Yeah.
But the employee needs to understand that a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for the termination could be an economic consideration.
Right.
And I think that's going to be a really tough sell because everybody understands what's happening.
Right. Right.
So those are the biggest issues. So as an employer, if I'm looking at employees, I still want to be cognizant of that, but I'm still feeling pretty comfortable that the decisions I'm making to terminate employees, they need to be neutral,
right?
Certainly, but you do have that cover based on economic considerations. Now, you can't just simply say, well, the economy was bad, so I had to fire all my employees who happen to be over 40 years of age.
Right.
Okay? You can't be doing that.
Right.
Or I'm firing all my employees who happen to be of a particular race.
Right.
Or all my employees who filed workers' compensation claims.
Right.
Don't be doing that.
Right.
But if you are doing it on a neutral basis, and you have the financials to show that, let's say, your purchase orders have gone down by 80% in the last 5 weeks,
right?
I think you're probably pretty safe.
And that's important, Adrian, because this is where your legal team and your HR team work with you, or your legal advisor and your HR advisor. Somebody really, we legal and HR tend to partner together in these things. So,
yeah.
Both having an eye towards risk, but also having an eye towards let's understand what the business decision is and then execute that in the best way that minimizes risk and treats the employees with the most amount of dignity and respect. So when you're trying to decide, I told you guys last week, when you're trying to decide, you need to think about first what work must continue. Start there. This is the work that must continue. What are the skills that are needed to do that work? Then you look at what skills are in my organization, and then you look at who has those skills. The last thing you look at is who the people are, because if you start with the people first, that's where your emotions get involved. That's when you're thinking, oh man, but Joe has 4 kids and his wife is sick and we just can't do it, and Jimmy is just 20, he'll be fine. You can't be making decisions like that, right, Adrian?
Yeah, correct.
That's not okay. It has to truly be as even-tempered and as non-discriminatory as possible in making these decisions. And again, this economic situation we're in now gives us great cover, but you still need to do the right thing. This is not your opportunity to fire that person you've been trying to fire for 20 years. You just can't figure out how to do it. This is not the time to do that, right? So let's talk a little bit about, most people, there may be small businesses, right, who have 5 or 10 people.
What about contract workers, if you don't mind me asking?
Did you hear that, Adrian? What about contract
workers?
Yeah.
Well, technically, if they're independent contractors, they're not going to be entitled to any type of protection under the federal or state statutes regarding employment discrimination and retaliation.
Right. And if you've written your independent contractor contracts, and please tell me that you have a contract with your independent contractors. If you've written those and you've worked with somebody like an Adrian, and you've got your contracts, there should be some kind of clause in there. Maybe there's a force majeure clause. Maybe there's a clause that says we can terminate this employment. Either party can terminate this agreement with 30 days notice for any reason. There should be things in your contract with your independent contractor that give you some cover for terminating the relationship for any reason.
Yeah, and employers need to be real careful, because this is not only applicable to what's going on right now, but like, for example, in Lowell, you're probably very familiar with this. Employers for years have been trying to shortcut wage and hour obligations under the Fair Labor Standards Act by just classifying people as independent contractors.
Right.
And you just don't call somebody an independent contractor and issue them a 1099 for pay purposes, and that's it. There's a 14 or 16 point IRS test that deals with control and who supplies tools and equipment. It's a pretty exhaustive analysis that comes into play when determining whether somebody is an independent contractor or not. So simply because you may have a contract that says you're an independent contractor doesn't necessarily make you an independent contractor.
Right. And someone can say, are you an independent contractor in fact and appearance, right? So if you're inviting them to every meeting, if they're wearing shirts with your logo on it, if you're providing the equipment.
You have to come to this meeting, that is a factor against independent contractor status.
Exactly. Because independent contractors are just that. They are independent. They get to decide when. You can say the what, I need this work done by this date.
By X date. But otherwise, you can do it as you see fit, where you see fit, when you want, just as long as it gets done.
Exactly. So unfortunately, independent contractors, at least from an employer perspective, they are not employees. So that contract can be terminated per the arrangements of the contract. You want to make sure you're following whatever you've written down. Without necessarily any other protections, as Adrian was saying.
Can they file unemployment?
Independent contractors cannot.
Did that change though, Adrian, with this new?
Yes, it did. Actually, I don't think
FFCRA, I think, said freelancers, right?
I don't think they're considered. I don't know if you get unemployment benefits, but I think there is a separate set of funds available for independent contractors under the Paycheck Protection Program.
Right. So here's the thing. If you're an independent contractor and your contract has been terminated, you need to go out there and do some research, because I think under the new Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or whatever it's called, FFCRA, there is that money, as Adrian was saying, that is pooled for independent contractors, but you just need to make sure you file it the right way. Because here's the other thing. If an independent contractor is, under regular circumstances, if an independent contractor goes and files for unemployment, and I've had this happen to a couple of clients, that independent contractor who filed for unemployment, that can trigger an investigation by the Department of Labor on the employer. To say, wait a minute, this person says they were an independent contractor, or the company says they're an independent contractor, but they applied for unemployment, which is for employees. What's the real deal, right? So even with independent contractors, you need to make sure when you have that relationship and you're talking to them that it is very clear that they are not eligible for unemployment.
Correct.
So, there's a lot of stuff you guys need to think about when you're looking at independent contractors versus employees. It is not like rocket science, but it does take some attention to detail to do it right.
And it can be technical at times.
It can be very technical at times. Now, if somebody has a business, Adrian, that is, 100 people, 200 people, still a small business, but not, a General Motors. There's some things that, like if you're having to do a layoff, some notices and some federal regulations they have to do, like a WARN notice, right? Can you talk a little bit about some of the regulations of notification that people might have to be prepared to do if they're actually going to go all the way to a layoff?
Yeah, and I thought there were some changes on the WARN Act. I thought some of those requirements had been relaxed a little bit because under typical WARN Act, if you're closing a plant or facility, and that is specifically defined in the WARN Act, I believe you have to give those employees, 90 days notice.
I thought it was 90 days, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 90 days notice. But goodness gracious, there isn't a whole lot of WARN Act litigation in Texas. We haven't had that because our economy has been so strong down here.
Right.
Typically, you see that more up on the East Coast, like when you had coal plant closures and steel plant closures.
Right.
So it's not that prevalent of an issue here. But and I apologize, I'm just not up to speed on that. But I thought I saw some relaxed obligations under the WARN Act, but that certainly is an issue because I think that only applies to a plant closure, and I think there's an employee number requirement.
Yeah, I think so too. It's like a certain percentage of your employees, if they're going to be laid off, then you have to notify.
Yeah.
So if you are a larger business and you are impacting a significant, and I would say 50% or more of your employee population, go seek some counsel.
Advice.
Yes, yeah, go get some legal advice. And we are hearing about some businesses that are closing, some plants that are closing. I think some of the, the meat packing plants that are closing. So they may be under some of these. So if you're running some of those businesses where you are truly having to close full locations, where you're laying people off, not just furloughing them, please go get some legal advice so you don't do something that's going to cause a problem for you later on. Because what you don't want to do is come out of this with a lot of litigation over your head. Just out of ignorance, because ignorance is not an excuse in litigation. Ignorance is not an excuse, right? Because people say, well, you can read, so how come you didn't know, right? Or how come you didn't ask somebody?
Ignorance is not going to be a mitigating factor.
Yeah. So you really need to make sure you're paying attention to that. So Adrian, let's talk a little bit about, because you have your own law firm as well. So as we go through and we have this show and we're talking about small businesses, the other thing we've been talking about is what are we doing as business owners ourselves, right? To really get ourselves in the right space to understand what we need to do, how we take care of ourselves, and then we can take care of our people. What are you doing, and how is it working from a legal perspective? Because you said you still are doing court, I guess, virtually now. What are you doing to keep your mind and head in the game under this?
You know what? To be honest with you, it's kind of business as usual.
Okay.
Some of the issues have changed, so I've had to study up on all the newer employment laws, which are basically you've had 40, 50 years of case law developed employment law, which is now kind of turned on its head because of these new pieces of legislation that have come down the pipe.
Right.
So that's one thing. But in terms of finances, which I think is what's on most people's minds, is just trying to get as lean as you can.
Yeah.
We've been living a little high on the hog lately. And it's just like, okay, so maybe here's an expenditure that I don't really need anymore.
Right.
I'll get rid of it. That's what I'm doing. And then the other thing is just kind of keeping my nose to the grindstone and just working as hard as I can. I still have a lot of work to do.
Right.
But when my employer clients are calling for a lot of consult work, I have to deal with those first and foremost because this thing is significantly time sensitive.
Right. Well, and guys,
and then the other thing is just trying to figure out how you can make yourself indispensable to your clients.
Yeah.
So maybe that, like for example, it's brilliant. You've got these, distilleries who are changing what they do. They're not making alcohol anymore. They're making hand sanitizer.
Right.
And So they may not be making the money they are with alcohol, but goodness gracious, the PR and the advertising that you're getting from that, I think is going to pay huge dividends in the future.
Agreed.
I think the goal is to survive and enhance your reputation.
You know, and that is so important because we've talked about that a lot, right, Jerry? That whole, people will remember how you treat them. People will remember how you respond. You know, if you go to ground and nobody sees you for the next 3 months, and then all of a sudden you're coming out of the gate when this is all over, where were you? Where were you when people needed you? Where were you in trying to make sure you were still serving in whatever capacity you could, you know? And so what Adrian was just talking about, I've said that a few times, that stop, start, continue list, right? What are the things you can stop doing? What are the things you start doing, like make hand sanitizer instead of alcohol, right? And what can you continue to do that is sustaining your business, that is key to your brand, key to your connection, you know, to your clients, that will enable you to become that indispensable resource, that you are someone that people see as available, as expert, as willing to serve, as willing to help. And that doesn't mean, you know, and this is always controversial, that doesn't mean you have to give everything away for free. I just heard today on the news this morning, there is an organization that is giving away, and I think it wasn't masks, I think it was a different kind of PPE. And so what they're doing is they are still charging for that, but they are charging at cost. Because they said this is not a time that we're worried about profit, but we at least, it was one of the teletherapy. They're like, we are no longer charging any markup for you to talk to our therapists, but we do need to pay the therapist. So we are charging what it costs us to turn that around and give it right back to the therapist. So, you know, in these times, it is not that you have to put holes in your own boat to save others, right? You still need to do what you need to do to survive. It just may mean that if you were making a 25% profit before, maybe that profit is 5% or break even. But you're still helping.
I agree with you 100% because I've taken on some new matters where I'm doing it at a reduced rate because I know that the employer, and I tell them, I'm like, look, for this time being, I'll reduce my hourly rate to X amount.
Right.
Once we get out of this, they'll go back to the normal rate. I think people are very appreciative of that.
Absolutely.
And it, again, kind of goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago, is enhancing that reputation and that relationship you're building with the client.
Exactly.
Or the general public, your customer base, whatever that may be. And it reminds me Jerry, you may remember this movie back from the 70s or 80s. You remember Mr. Mom?
I don't know.
Pardon?
What's he saying, Jerry?
What he said? How am I know something in the 70s? Yes.
No, it's a really good movie.
Yeah, Mr. Mom, I remember.
Mr. Mom. And so Michael Keaton is this high-end executive, and he gets laid off from an auto plant because there's this huge economic downturn. And his wife is this advertising executive for this company called Schooner Tuna. And what they decided to do was do this huge advertising campaign where they were reducing the price of tuna to cover their costs while the economic crisis was going on. And I'm like, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Right. Because
again, it's to survive. We'll get out of this. I have no question that we won't come out of this. It's just a matter of when and surviving until that time comes.
Exactly. And what can you do to serve in the meantime, right? What can you do to make a difference and to make a change? And this is, you know, I said this very, very early on, may have even been in the first show. You know, some of the greatest businesses were built during the Depression, right? People who got really creative and really innovative. There was on the news this morning, I couldn't believe this. So I don't know if anybody's seen, but there is this couple who in their house made this thing. It looks like a truck, but inside the truck they put together this process where they can take masks like PPE and they can sterilize it so they can be reused. And they can do like 80 masks at a time, right? And so you can reuse it, which is just phenomenal for hospitals and healthcare providers. And so I heard on the news this morning, and I want to go back and watch their interview because they were interviewing them on the Today Show. They're probably making the whole circuit. They have now, because of this innovation, they now received a $400 and something million dollar contract from the government to build,
Wow.
I think it was 100 plus more of these kind of facilities or these trucks to be able to sterilize so many more masks because it meets the need of what we have right now, right? So if we can't get new product produced fast enough, how can we extend the life of the product we do have in the system? And so they figured out how to do that. And so I only give you that to say, you know, not everybody's going to come out of here with a $400 million contract from the government. That's not reasonable. But what is reasonable is sitting down, spending time. What is that unique gift that you have that nobody else has? Those times when you say, man, I wish I had thought of that, right? Like I always think, who thought of the little plastic thing on the end of shoelaces so you could easily get them through the holes? I'm like, how much money did they make, right?
Yeah.
So what are those little things that are conveniences that you can think about, that you can design in your house, or, you know, just make up something, go find a friend that's an engineer. Where can you start to collaborate to find a solution that makes a difference? Because if you are focused on a solution that makes a difference, making that difference is where then the other stuff comes. The profit comes, the visibility comes, the reputation comes, because your focus is on making a difference, not on just the money. If you're focused on the money, that's harder to get. If you're focused on the difference, the money comes. I truly believe that.
So,
That's the truth.
so can we talk about intellectual property for a second?
Yes, please. That's really critical.
Okay, so if you are one of those folks who you think that you've got this novel idea or product, and you think that it's going to be critical for you to protect that intellectual property. That intellectual property has tremendous value.
Yes.
Because if you go out to the marketplace and you have something that unique that is subject to intellectual property protections, and you haven't filed either a patent application or a provisional patent application, anybody can take it, they can file patents on it, and they have protection.
Right.
It's irrelevant that you may have thought about it first. The issue is, did you file for protection first? Now, what you can do is, if you have something, I would encourage you to go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office.
Okay.
It's www.uspto.gov. And on there, you can do searches of what's in the intellectual property world is called prior art. And so they have these search terms. It's basically like doing a Google search
Right.
on that website. And let's say, to use Laurel's example, PPE sanitation,
Right.
PPE cleaning. Just think of a whole bunch of queries and search terms to use and see what's out there. You can actually pull up patent applications, read them, and see how you can draft your patent application to show that your idea is different from prior art.
Right.
Okay? And at that point, if you think you've got something, I would contact an intellectual property lawyer. I don't really do that, but I know some folks who are exceptional at doing that, and
Right.
they're pretty reasonably priced. Some of these big firm intellectual property lawyers, they're just completely cost prohibitive.
Right. Right.
But I know some folks that if you are one of those folks and you've got somebody, either Laurel has my number,
Right.
Gary certainly has my number. Just give me a shout,
Absolutely.
and I'll put you in touch with them,
Yeah.
and just get the ball rolling there. Because drafting a patent application, I've got 2 patent applications, so that's how I know about this entire process. There is a definite art and expertise that goes into that.
Right.
And to be a patent lawyer, you actually not only have to have a law degree, you also have to have an undergraduate degree as an engineer, and you also have to be licensed before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So
Yeah.
you really have to be an expert in that arena to be able to do that. But if you have something really unique, don't just rush out to market or post your product on Instagram or Facebook, because it could be stolen from you.
Absolutely.
Is that like with people making masks now?
Right.
Can anybody just make them now? You can't just claim that you made that original idea, right?
Yeah, at this point, it is what it is, right? It's too late. I mean, I guess if you have some really unique design that has a certain kind of filter and all that kind of stuff, but as Adrian is saying, you need to go out there and do research, because it really has to be completely different for the USPTO to even consider it. And it has to go through engineers and all of that to do it. And I will tell you, I've got some trademarks. So even when I did my business, to trademark my my logos, I've got some copyrights, and I've got an attorney in Atlanta who I went to school with who does that. It's an IP, a lawyer. And he's right. I mean, I was like, look, I don't know. All I know is I want this. And so I just need you to tell me what I need to do to get it. Right? And so I'm like, here's my stuff. And then he took care of all of that for me. And there is absolutely an art. And where are you going to classify it under? You know, is it under a rate like this? Is it a radio show? Is it a podcast? Is it, consulting? There is so much detail. So Adrian is right. If you've got a unique idea, you need to get that protected. Now, Adrian, one of the things I heard very early on, and I don't know if this still holds true, so I'm going to ask you. I was told, and this has been years ago, that if you have a really great idea, and say you've done a design, you've got all of this stuff, that you take all of that, you put it in an envelope, you mail it to yourself. Yeah. Is that what the thing is, Jerry, is you mail it to yourself, certified mail, and you never open it, right? And that theoretically, that is proof of when you did that. Now, Adrian, so my question to you is, does that even count anymore? Does that matter?
I don't think it does. Well, it may have counted at one time. As far as I'm concerned, no. The only thing that establishes is an approximate date of when you came up with the idea.
Okay.
But again, it's first to file.
Right.
So let's say if you have an idea and you're just talking about it with some friends in your living room while you're quarantined and maybe or maybe not having a couple beers.
Right.
And that quote unquote friend of yours takes the idea and files a patent, tough cookies.
Yep, you're done.
You're done.
Yeah.
And so if you are going to be talking about ideas like this, certainly if you're talking about it with your lawyer, they cannot steal it.
Right.
Ethically, they cannot steal it. They're going to lose their license.
Right.
But if you're talking with anybody else who's not legally representing you, have them sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Yes.
That's another way to protect yourself.
I love a good non-disclosure agreement, y'all.
Yeah.
I love a good non-disclosure agreement. Yeah, so if you need one, we're going to make sure you have Adrian's information. If you need a non-disclosure agreement, Adrian is a great place to get one. Go get one. Because here's the thing. Even if, this was one of our first shows, Jerry, we talked about it is not unkind to be clear. So don't get all in your feelings about how you don't want to seem, you don't want to seem mad, you don't want to seem unreasonable. This is business. This is not personal. And so if you have a situation that you need to talk about something, you want to talk about ideas, get that clarity up front. Get it lined out up front. We are not going to talk about this. If something should come out of this, here's what it's going to look like in terms of how we're going to split not only the investment, but the return. Get all that done up front, because that way it's clear before feelings get involved. Because once feelings get involved, it can get ugly.
Yeah.
So just get it up front. Get it up front.
Now you're talking about like a partnership agreement too, but I'm just talking about talking about an idea.
That too.
So let's say if I have an idea and I have an idea about this cleaning, this mask sterilization process. And I have an idea of what I want to do, but I don't have the expertise of the chemical compounds that are involved in that cleaning process.
Right.
Or the engineering principles involved in that process, right? Let's say then, because you don't have that expertise, you have to go somewhere else, either to a commercial chemist or some type of engineer. You can still take your idea to them, but have them sign the non-disclosure.
Right.
Okay? So it's not limited just to friends.
Right.
Anybody who may be involved in the process or from whom you're trying to get information from to put this idea together.
Exactly. Well, and here's a caution. Now that you mentioned that, here's a caution, because having worked at a chemical company, right, and even before we spun off, pharmaceutical company, you know, the company had, you know, chemical engineers, research scientists, all this kind of stuff, and any person who was in that area actually signed a contract with the company that if they developed something or there was a patent, the patent belonged, their name was on the patent, but the patent belonged to the company, right? So I only give you this to say, based on what Adrian just said, if you know somebody, like I know a ton of chemical engineers, right? So if I thought of something, I know some people that I would go to because I trust them. But trust only goes so far, because here's the deal. You want to get the NDA, but you also want to understand clearly. Let's say I'm talking to somebody and they're a chemical engineer at this company, and I've got an NDA with them so that they can't discuss it, but they somehow start using equipment or time or whatever at their company to help me develop whatever this thing is. We need to be really clear that somehow that has not put me in a position where now their company that doesn't have anything to do with my idea now owns my patent or has a piece of it, right?
Yeah, that is an excellent hypothetical, because I guarantee you that if that intellectual property indeed has some value, that big company is going to bury you.
Absolutely. You're done.
You will not be able to financially defend that intellectual property claim.
Right.
It's not.
Right. So when you're going to your friends and colleagues who are still working somewhere, I'm not saying don't go, but you need to be really clear, because just their failure to understand that risk could completely undermine everything you're trying to do.
So I would, in fact, in that situation, I would probably have verbiage in the non-disclosure agreement saying that the recipient is expressly prohibited from discussing or using time or resources from any third party or person in the further development of this product.
Exactly. And then the other piece of this is, and I heard, and I wish I could remember the product now because I was just fascinated, and I actually posted it on my Facebook page. Gosh, where was this company? I think they were in India. But they have a patent, and they actually decided to just give out their designs. They just gave them out to everybody. And they said, we are not going to charge, we are not going to sue, we're not going to do any of this, because it is so important right now for people to be able to build this thing, wish I could remember what it was, to build this thing, that we are going to just give it away. Now, here's the deal. They own the patent, so they can do that. But two, look at the reputation that they're building by saying, profit is not number one for us right now. Making sure that people have access to this information is. So when you decide that you've got this great idea and you want to protect your intellectual property, make sure you do that. I'm not saying don't protect it. Make sure you protect it. But also put yourself in a position to decide, even once it's protected, if I decide or I am so moved to give it out, then do that, right? Because at this point in time, we all need everybody. Everybody needs to help everybody. There's a kid who developed with all these 3D printers, people are 3D printing all kinds of stuff. And there's all kinds of patterns on the internet and everything you can think of. So protect the stuff that's really unique to you. Make sure you're protecting yourself. Make sure you're protecting your time. Make sure you're protecting your investment. And when you do that, make a conscious decision when you can just give and just support. And just say, you know what, for this period of time, I'm either going to drop my raise, or I'm just going to give this piece out, or I'm going to make this available. Because at the end of the day, if you are giving and giving freely and giving without strings, I believe that comes back to you tenfold. I just believe that. That's just the way I'm wired. It will come back to you, right? And so while this is there's always opportunity in crisis. And that's really hard to say because it sounds so sinister, right? But there is opportunity in crisis. And if there's a way for you to take advantage of that opportunity, then you should do so. I just think, pay attention to karma.
This is a statement on Facebook. Says Elon Musk released the Tesla patents for electric cars as part of the efforts to fight climate change.
Yes, he sure did. Elon Musk was one. Yeah. that did that. And there are several companies that are making the conscious decision to just release some stuff right now.
That's good.
You know, it's amazing what people actually are doing. I also heard another post today, and this is something to think about, and Adrian, please jump in as well here, is, you know, there are lots of small businesses right now. There are those of us who are, you know, sole proprietors. It's just us. There are those who have small businesses, you know, 500 people or less, that are really going to be impacted now. Even if they had been able to make it through because of the expansion under this Families First Act, and now the obligation they have around unemployment benefits and pay time off and all this kind of stuff, there are businesses that are being significantly impacted. If there is a way, either now or as you come out, to truly support that local business, please do that. Don't just automatically go online and order it from Amazon. That's really convenient and that helps, right? And you can get it in 2 days or whatever. But if you can find a way to support your local business, that's where families are supported. Mm-hmm. That's where communities are built. That's where our nation is founded. So as we come out of this, if you can find a way through either giving your services or giving advice or supporting or buying, you know, gift certificates from a local restaurant or something that can start to support your local business, I encourage you to do that, because when we come out of this, there are going to be many families who are going to have a hard time recovering because their family was that business and they may or may not be able to rebuild. So if there's a way for you to do that, please do. The other thing I want to,
100%.
Yeah, it's really important. The other thing I want to say is for those people who have been furloughed and are laid off, but even furloughed, and who are looking for additional employment or other employment. I just talked to a really good friend of mine who is a recruiter. She's an exceptional recruiter. I just talked to her a couple days ago. And Amazon is in fact hiring. It was on the news again. Amazon is hiring, both full-time and part-time.
Is this the same person we both know?
It could be. It could be. And so we...
Okay, Amazon.
Right. That works at Amazon. So they are hiring. Go on their website and they have everything posted. They are hiring. Microsoft is hiring right now. Google is hiring right now. One of the things to do is, if you're in this situation, and this is going to sound so easy, and it is not easy. This is hard. Looking for a job is a full-time job, especially when the economy is crazy. So go out to, one of the easiest ways to do this is go out to utilize Indeed and utilize LinkedIn. If you are not on LinkedIn, you need to get yourself together and get on LinkedIn, because people who post jobs on LinkedIn are paying to post those jobs. So they're serious. Okay?
Well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
So shifting away from the employer perspective,
right?
But let's say you're somebody who has been furloughed,
yep,
or laid off, and you have, let's say, thousands of people looking for a very finite number of jobs.
Right.
How do you distinguish yourself, make yourself stand out to a potential employer when you don't have the benefit of a face-to-face interview?
Right.
When you're just doing it online?
That's a really good question. So there's a couple of things. One, make sure you've got a profile on LinkedIn, because recruiters now are using LinkedIn. That's almost getting to be the number one. So make sure you've got a profile on LinkedIn that's really strong. Has a picture.
Not like me wearing a golf visor.
No. Please put a professional picture on your LinkedIn. We don't want to see you at the beach with your beer. Put a professional picture on LinkedIn.
I don't drink.
Oh, please, people, please. So make sure your LinkedIn profile is updated. Make sure it's clear. Make sure it's clean. Make sure it talks about where you've been, to the extent that you can use numbers. I have sold this amount of money. I've made this kind of return. Make sure people understand what you have done. So use really strong action words when you do your LinkedIn profile. The other thing is, and this is for those of us who are in HR and those of us who have been recruiting and finding talent for a long time, here's the thing I need you to know about recruiters. And there are exceptional recruiters. And there are some that are not so great. It's just like everything. You have everything on the spectrum. But here's the thing with recruiters who are internal. Recruiters who are internal have so much pressure to just put a butt in a seat that they are not necessarily going to have the time to decipher your resume. That's not what they're trying to do. So that means it's on you to show how what you have done matches what they are looking for. So if you go out on Indeed or you go out on LinkedIn and you see this job, and this job lists, here are the things that we need someone to be able to do in this job, and here are the skills we need them to have. You need to look at your resume, and you need to look and determine how you can use those same words in your resume. If they say, we need someone who has worked with highly flammable chemicals in an industrial plant, then you need to use those words in your resume saying, for the last 5 years, I have been a chemical engineer in this plant working in an environment of highly flammable liquids with a 0 safety incident record. Those are the kind of things you need to do. So don't just send a general resume. What are they looking for in the job? And put specific language in your resume, in your profile that matches the language that's in the job description. That means you may have a different profile or a different resume for every job you apply for. I am so sorry, but that's the world we live in right now. It's a lot of work, but just make it happen. And then use your network. Right now especially, it's important who you know.
It is.
Who you know. And do you know somebody who knows somebody that can get you in? And here's the deal, y'all. I don't recommend everybody. I don't recommend everybody. And I will be very clear if someone comes to me and says, hey, I see this job. This is something I really want. Can you introduce me to this person? If I can't with 100% certainty introduce you, I'm not going to. And I will tell you I'm not going to, and I'll tell you why. Right? Because it is important that any kind of introduction that you're doing, and I'm saying this to everybody, both the person who's asking for the introduction and the person who's giving it, it is important that you can do a recommendation with the utmost integrity, because here's what happens. The minute you recognize someone who is not going to show up to an interview on time, who really doesn't have the skills, or whatever the issue is that doesn't work, that means that the next time you try to recommend somebody, the person is going to say, ooh, yeah, they recommended somebody last time and that didn't work at all. I'm not sure we're going to use that. So you have taken a hit to your own reputation, and you've also hindered your ability to help someone else down the road. So, bringing that all around, look on Indeed, get a profile, a strong profile on LinkedIn, look at jobs on LinkedIn, adjust your resume to what they are looking for so it is very clear that you fit that role. Look and see who's connected to who and how you can make those networking connections work for you. Make sure that you are really clear on how you fit. You know, there's this whole thing about transferable skills and all these buzzwords. Here's what that really means. Just because you worked in healthcare doesn't mean you can't work in industrial manufacturing. But you need to show people how what you did in healthcare meets what you did, what they're looking for in industrial manufacturing. They're not going to do that for you. You need to do that. So it is difficult. It is harder now because there are so few jobs, but people are still hiring. There are still essential businesses going on. Go out and look and see what people are hiring for and apply and use your networks. This is not a time to be shy. You don't need to be arrogant, right? And you don't need to be egotistical because you are looking for a job. You need to have a level of humility, but you also need to be very confident in what your skills are. And talk to your village and your support, because it can be soul crushing to be furloughed or laid off. And I have been laid off. My very first job, they hired 5 of us new. 4 months later, they said, we are so sorry, oil and gas, we're gonna have to let y'all go. First job. So I get it. It is not easy, and it is a hit to your ego. I need you to just breathe that in, have an adult beverage or two, have a great meal, and then get to work. Because just sitting there isn't gonna make it different. You've got to do something and reach out to your network.
You know, one thing I want to say this when you said that I was looking down the street. I noticed that when I come here to the radio stations in the morning, that Alfreda's Soul Food is lit up. Mm-hmm. This thing across the street is lit up. Turkey Leg Hut is lit up. They even got a mobile truck where they've come to the north side of town, and they're selling out like crazy because they're mobile. And I was thinking about Alfreda's, and I don't know if they have a delivery driver, but they would need to do is hire delivery drivers, because if people are not coming to the building. And the only reason I still continue to come to the radio station is because everybody can't go in a business. And so you have to think about that, because when this is over, you're going to still need a business to come to. And
Absolutely.
even if you're not making money now, you have to look at the long term of it. That you will be making money again
Yes.
eventually,
You will.
but not if they don't know that you're still there.
Right.
Yep.
And what are you doing? One of the things we talked about even with my business coaches is, you know, when you talk about that stop, start, continue, now is not the time to stop advertising, right? You may not be able to do that TV spot anymore, but can you put some ads on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn?
Okay,
KCOH TV, The Boost, put an ad out, right? Let people know you are still in business. Let people know you're still, the TV stations now are saying, you know, send us your stuff, send us your pictures, send us, wherever you can make sure people know you are still there. And to your point, Jerry, if you are willing, if you've got a commercial driver's license, if you've got a regular driver's license, right? What can you do to go offer your services? It may be, hey, I can deliver for you part-time, and you can negotiate some kind of little spending money or something, right? Gas money. So don't just sit in overwhelm. Don't just sit and say, I don't know what to do. I can't. And I'm not saying that that's not a reasonable response. It is a reasonable response to be overwhelmed, to be depressed, to be upset, because this is real. This is real impact. What I'm telling you is do that, own that, sit in that, and then keep moving. Because sitting in that is not going to make it different. You've got to do something active. Continue to move forward. All right. Do we have any, I'm looking at the time. Do we have any other questions that have come through or comments for Adrian before we get him to tell you guys how to get in touch with him? And
can I say this one comment? Because that was Carl Davis from the city of Houston, but he came by and he wanted to make a commercial. And I'm like, I don't have access to that because I sent the employees home. And then I thought about it. No, she has the equipment at home.
Yes.
And so when you were talking earlier about who is essential and who is not, because I'm a company within a company,
right?
Because I outsource help from other places. And these are people that are very essential to me,
yes,
in order to keep this moving, in order to keep that going. And so a lot of people will send people home, but you really do have to think, is there sacrifices you can personally make to make sure you keep what's essential to you to keep what you're doing going?
That's why I say stop, start, continue.
Wow.
Sit in that and take some time.
You know what I've learned about all this?
What?
Which has been, you know, I had an opportunity to be very reflective, is it how incredibly reliant we are on everybody else.
Yes.
It's like everybody hears the term supply chain.
Right.
We are a human societal supply chain.
Yes.
And
That's true.
but I think we've taken this for granted for way too long.
That interdependency is real, right? That whole, 6 degrees of separation. What is that, Kevin Bacon? 6 degrees of separation. We are reliant on other people. None of us gets to or through this life alone. Nobody. Nobody. And so take that time to really understand what's important to you and how you can continue to make that stuff happen and who you can use. Like you're saying, Jerry, can you still use these contractors and find a different creative way to make this stuff happen?
Yeah.
Just because you're not sitting right next to somebody doesn't mean that work can't happen. And we're going to talk some more about accommodations, and we'll have Adrian on again as well. We're going to talk some more about accommodations because, and we'll talk about this a little bit next week, because we have had to figure out different ways to do work. Many people who were reluctant to do work from home and no, people have to stay at work or it's not really working, have now come to the realization that, I don't have to have people right here. And there's a snowball effect to that, right? Well, if everybody doesn't have to be here, do I still need this big office space? Do I still need to be in this big office building? Do I still need to have this contract with a parking garage that lets me subsidize parking for all my people, right? So there's a snowball of that. And there's also a long-term impact to organizations that say, you know what? Before, when we were talking about flexible work, these were the only jobs that were flexible. But now we're learning that other jobs can be flexible too. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of actual accommodations that you are required to make for people if they have, a broken leg or if they have to be off for a certain amount of time? So we're going to talk a little bit about that new world and what that looks like. And also for you as an individual, what that means about your flexibility, how you deal with the team that needs more flexibility, how you manage your own flexibility going forward. So we'll talk about that next week. Adrian, thank you.
It's always a pleasure, and I'm always available for y'all.
Yay!
Can I endorse Adrian real quick?
Please do. And we need to know how to get in touch with you, Adrian.
I want to endorse iCandy, who's also a part of the Ben Hall Legal Hour, but as an excellent attorney, because he's my attorney. Yeah. And he got the job done and really got me some good things happening for me. And I appreciate you for that, Adrian.
You know what, Jerry? I love you and I appreciate you too. And yeah, I got Jerry some money.
That was a while back ago.
Right? So, Adrian, if people want.
What's the statute of limitations on me being able to brag about
Right?
that?
So, how do people find you, Adrian?
You know what? You could just call me. And if you happen to lose the number, you can't take it down. Jerry's got my number,
Yes,
but
okay.
it's 832-865-7940.
All right. So, if you guys need, especially here in Houston, you guys need somebody, we got you, Adrian. If you're trying to find me, you can text LEAD 2020, LEAD 2020 to 474747. You can get on my calendar. We can have a chit chat, figure out how we can get you through this overwhelm. So thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Cassandra, Mary, V, Marcia, thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody on KCOH TV, The Boost, on Jerry's page, I appreciate you being here. We'll catch you next week. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, Adrian.
Bye, guys. Y'all take care.
You
Bye.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.